I currently practice what for me is solo polyamory. And I define this as I don't have any primary relationships except with myself. So my main focus is for me to be happy with myself and to be confident and secure in myself, so that I can then show up as a good partner in relationships outside of that.
Welcome to Normalizing Non-Monogamy, the podcast where we interview incredible people from across the entire spectrum of non-monogamy to hear their fascinating stories. We strive to bring guests on the show who have a healthy approach to non-monogamy. However, it's important to remember that everyone does it a little bit differently, and the views and opinions expressed by our guests do not necessarily reflect our own.
Additionally, we produce this show for entertainment purposes only. Please be aware that we aren't doctors or therapists. Consult a medical professional for anything regarding your health that you might learn about on the show. Enjoy!
Well, welcome to episode 291. We're Finn and Emma, and today we have a wonderful conversation with Sara. Sara is from Belgium and has always known throughout her life that she's not monogamous, but she didn't put language to that until about 7 or 8 years ago. We dive into so much of her story today.
Yeah, this is a wonderful conversation, and just a huge thank you to Sara for reaching out and for coming on and for sending us a voicemail. We'll come to that later. But just a huge amount of gratitude. And one of the things, actually a few of the things that I wanted to just maybe say up front about this conversation that were some of the key themes that were really amazing were around navigating non-monogamy and frankly life in general as a neurodivergent person. And one of the things Sara talks about is not only is she neurodivergent, but her partners are as well. And they've found ways to really work together in a beautiful way.
Yes.
And so we wanted to maybe just say that up front. And there's also some really great conversations about coming out to family and really just embracing life and exploring life and trying anything once. Mm-hmm. So today we're excited because this is a beautiful, fun, uplifting, happy conversation.
Yes. Before we jump into the interview with Sara, we do have a couple of announcements. You're going to stay tuned for these.
We got new announcements.
We do. If you're a premium subscriber, we're going to jump right into the interview now. If you're not a premium subscriber, don't worry. You can become one by going to our website, normalizingnonmonogamy.com, and scrolling down on the homepage and signing up right there. By signing up for a premium subscription, you get to skip these introductions at the front and jump right into the interview. But don't worry, you still get important dates at the outro.
One thing we do want to mention also up here, we are taking a break for the summer from our virtual meet and greets.
Yep.
So we will be back probably in August or maybe September, but we'll tell you when and we'll see you then.
Yes.
Well, we'll see you before then. We'll see you every week until then. We're just taking a break from the virtual meet and greets.
Yes, only the virtual meet and greets. Nothing else is paused, which leads me to the community.
The community is not paused.
No.
The community is expanding.
It is. We're super, super excited. So for those of you not familiar, we have an online community. We have monthly Q&As. We have monthly calls for men's groups and women's groups, and an online great ongoing support network. If you're interested in joining, you can do so on our website under the community tab. It's only $5 a month.
And there are about 300 of you in there, and over 150 or so are active on a daily basis. And so it's a pretty vibrant community, and we're super excited about it. So Thank you to all of you who are in there all day, every day, supporting one another. And along those same lines, we are actually expanding some of the things we're offering for the virtual community. And the big one that we're doing are virtual weekly peer support groups. And so I've actually been running one of these since October as the men's group. We've had a weekly men's group with about 11 or 12 of us, and we've been meeting every week, and it has been absolutely incredible. I am totally blown away by it. I don't know what I expected, but it blew away all of my expectations. And so I'm going to talk about the details about what's coming in a minute. But before I do, I just wanted to read a testimonial that one of the members and friend of ours, an amazing support system for everything we've ever done has just been there for us. And we're so grateful for the support. But his testimonial says as follows. I was lucky enough to be included in the first weekly men's group cohort. While I'm in individual and couples therapy, the single best thing for my personal growth and journey has been the weekly men's group. I've bonded, laughed, cried, and formed lifelong friendships. It seems to be uncommon for men to support men in such a way, and that's unfortunate. The honesty, vulnerability, and safety that we share is invaluable, and more people need it in their life. I highly recommend this group or a similar one to everyone I know. I'm a forever participant and apostle and believe that you will be incredibly positively benefited if you join.
Wow.
So he said it so much better than I said it clearly, but so a ton of gratitude for that. And so, yeah, thank you.
I want to chime in. And I just want to say that another thing that Finn and I are doing alongside all of this work on the podcast and community is we're both getting more education around coaching and learning to lead groups. And so we're both in different programs, and I won't go into all the details because I want to keep this more concise, but we are on that path.
Yeah. Yeah, and we are both in the middle of that path.
Yes.
We aren't just theoretically going to do this path.
Right.
So part of what we wanted to bring to the group at this time are some additional weekly support groups. So we are launching an additional cohort of the men's group. We are launching a women's group, a weekly women's group, and we are launching a gender inclusive group. And so all of these groups, you can find out more information about how to join them on our website, normalizingnonmonogamy.com. Click on the community tab and you'll see a link there to find out all of the information, which is the same place you would sign up to join the community.
Right. And so what would be included in these weekly support groups would be a weekly 90-minute call. We're going to do cohorts of 10 people maximum, and then Finn or I will be part of this. So you will have weekly 90-minute calls plus an online platform with just the 10 people in that cohort that you'll have access to in ongoing chats throughout the weeks between the calls.
Yeah, and you'll need to be a part of our virtual community, which is, again, just a couple of bucks a month to join this, because all of the technical stuff happens and all of the community work happens on that platform.
Yes.
So again, we will happily answer any questions. Send us an email, send us a voicemail. We can give you more information. Again, there's more information on the community tab on our website. And we'll continue to announce this for the next few weeks as we fill up these cohorts. And hopefully we'll be able to launch more in the future.
Yeah, we're super excited if you can't tell. And we would love to hear from you. Again, like Finn said, go to our website and fill out the form if you're interested, or send us a voicemail, send us an email with any questions, comments, concerns. And that's in general, actually, reach out to us. If you'd like to come on the podcast, share your story, or if you'd have any other things you'd like to share, please reach out to us.
And with that, we're going to jump into the interview here with Sara. We normally tell you about stdcheck.com and how amazing it is, but we just did, and you can go find links in the podcast show notes on our website, normalizingnonmonogamy.com. Click on the podcast tab, or in your podcast player below, there are links to everything you could ever want.
Yep. You can get a discount on stdcheck.com.
You can. Shh, we're not telling them about that.
Okay, let's go talk to Sara. Welcome to the podcast, Sara. Thank you for being here today from across the world. We're excited to chat. So how are you?
It's evening.
It is indeed evening for me.
True. How are you right now? Let me rephrase that.
I am mostly excited to be here. Thank you.
Great.
Mostly. All right. Well, hopefully by the end we'll check in and you will be 1,000% excited to be here. Do you mind introducing yourself for us, I suppose, and the listeners get the added benefit as well?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Sara. I'm a 40-year-old white cisgender woman from all the way across the world in Belgium. I identify as queer. More specifically, I think I feel most comfortable with the label pansexual. I also identify as neurodivergent. I'm a highly sensitive person, have suffered some brain trauma, and that is why I would not be very happy if you were playing music under this entire interview.
Got it. Well, just for anybody listening who's wondering what we're talking about, plug your ears, Sara. I now have sound effects, and I added this music a second ago, and you were like, no, don't do that.
I mean, you could still choose to do it, but then this conversation would be very brief.
And have a great afternoon.
Yes. My brain would not be able to tolerate that and have like a sensible conversation at the same time for a very long time. So.
Fair enough. Well, thank you for letting us know.
Thank you for sharing.
And for explaining that. And so I'm excited to dig into all of that, because I can imagine all of the different things that you just talked about have impacted your journey. Mm-hmm. And maybe just rewinding the clock back to the beginning, where did non-monogamy and all of that first come into life, or maybe being pansexual or not registering? What's the word? It's too early in the morning here. realizing when you realize that you're pansexual. I'm just gonna leave that in.
I wasn't sure what you were going for. I was like, I'm trying to read your mind. I don't know.
The realization that you are pansexual. All right, I'm gonna stop talking. It's your turn now, Sarah. Go for it.
Thank you. I want to say that I've probably always known that I wasn't monogamous on a deeper level, but didn't come into the vocabulary attached with it until maybe 7 or 8 years ago.
Okay.
At that time, I was in an ethical non-monogamous relationship, a relationship where we started having conversations about what it means to be relating to one another and how we wanted to design the relationship very quickly on, just after a few months. And throughout that relationship, it also became clear that we started exploring things through the scene of swinging. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't necessarily interested in the sexual dimension of it. I mean, that did titillate me and it did excite me and it brought me a lot of joy and fun exploring, but it wasn't really what got me hooked. What got me hooked was building connections with people on a very deep level. And I also have this tendency of crushing on other people while I'm in a monogamous relationship. And that was something that I struggled with for a really long time. I was raised a Catholic and felt like a really bad person whenever I was having feelings for someone else or just starting to notice that I was interested in someone else, because I was raised with the idea that you marry the one person that is the one for you, and you settle down with them and you start a family. That's the idea I was raised with, but that didn't resonate with me with how I was experiencing things in my life. And there was a lot of emotional turmoil about that, I would say. I literally, for a while in my early 20s, thought that I was going to go to hell for, not being able to, and I'm using my words, choosing my words carefully here, not being able to fit into that mold, because that's really how it felt to me. Like there was a side of me that I had to suppress because it wasn't allowed by society, or at least not by the type of society that I was raised in, that I was surrounded by.
Yeah. It wasn't just that you didn't want to do it. It was that it went against the grain of who you were.
Yeah, exactly. So this brings me to how I see polyamory in my life is, for me, it's a sexual orientation. It's not a choice. The choice I've made is to live by it. Right? I've been practicing it actively since 4 or 5 years. After that first open relationship, or openish relationship, after that ended, I made a very deliberate choice to not engage in monogamous relationships anymore. But I would say that was the springboard, that relationship was the springboard that put me in touch with a lot of the vocabulary with that partner at the time. As I said, we were exploring swinging. We were also active in the burner community. I've been to several burns in Europe. I've been to Burning Man a couple of times. We engaged in the kink community over here in Belgium, as well as abroad. And I felt very comfortable in all of these arenas and all of these fields where people were doing things slightly differently from what mainstream society does. And that made me feel very much recognized, very much seen, and made me feel very much at home. And that is something that was like a huge weight was lifted off my shoulders. So that's why I decided to start leaning into that and actively exploring that a lot more.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I'm curious, it sounds like about 8 years ago, you got into a non-monogamous relationship, and that was, like you said, that was the springboard. How did that come to exist? Like, how did you find yourself in a non-monogamous relationship?
The very concrete reason was Burning Man. My then partner was going to go to Burning Man in the States that summer. We had just met, and I was curious about it, and I was asking about what the experience entailed for him, and whether it was mainly dancing or art or drugs or sex even. And so when I touched upon that topic, he brought up that the sexual was indeed part of the experience for him. And I instantly felt like I didn't want to be the one to take that away for him, to tell him that I don't want you to engage in any kind of sexual sexual experience, sexual activity while you're there, because if that's part of your of what you love about it, I want you to be able to go there and have those experiences. That was all fun and games in theory. In practice, it was really hard for me to then find out that he had indeed gone to Burning Man and had sex with someone else. And I'm air quoting here because this is just me unlearning a lot of the things, a lot of the narratives that monogamy imposes on people in society. And so this was really me also being confronted with, at that time, the boundaries or the limitations of my thinking. And it wasn't until we started exploring things together that I found out that I actually quite enjoyed the experience of seeing him engage with other people and be sexual with other people. And that was really eye-opening. And I think the transition and the shift and the rethinking of a lot of these concepts, such as insecurity and jealousy, really, that's really when the ball started rolling and when these things started to unfold.
Yeah. And so prior to that, so you said that was about 8 years ago. And then, but prior to that, you had been trying to fit into the mold for all through your 20s, and just like, you couldn't, like, it wasn't working, but you didn't actually understand another option until this relationship.
Well, there's one other factor that was helping me realize this, and that was, well, I'm calling this person a factor now, but that is
experience.
That is actually my current girlfriend. So I will come to that story in a minute, but maybe this is a good segue into what my current relationship constellation looks like.
And then I have a couple of questions about jealousy or envy tying back into the Burning Man experience. But let's talk about your relationship constellation. That's great.
So I currently practice what for me is solo polyamory. And I define this as I don't have any primary relationships except with myself. So my main focus is for me to be happy with myself and to be confident and secure in myself, so that I can then show up as a good partner in relationships outside of that. I did not invent this definition myself. I borrow it lovingly from a friend who gave me their permission to borrow it. But I think it captures really well why polyamory is working so well for me, because I used to have a tendency, and I'm still sometimes prone to it, I will admit, a tendency to codependence, where I was really almost forgetting myself when I was in a one-on-one relationship in particular, where I would put my partner's needs before mine. And then after a while, I would realize what I was doing, and then I would have to rewind the clock. But of course, you can't rewind it. And then it becomes really unsettling for the other party that my behavior changes. And so it tends to get a bit problematic is a big word, but it tends to get a bit messy when that realization hits. And for me, in solo polyamory, I can maintain my autonomy. I live by myself, and I have a cat who just now is walking in and joining the conversation. But so my autonomy is really important. Part of being a highly sensitive person is I need a lot of alone time. I need a lot of time to decompress from the world at large, which I find very invasive at times. And so I have more energy, and I can make better decisions about how to spend my energy with other people when I have a lot of downtime. And that's why solo poly works very well for me.
I love it.
Yeah. And so within that constellation, there are currently two, let's say, stable partners whom I've been with for several years. I will call them, just for the ease of conversation, I will call them my girlfriend and my boyfriend, even though I don't like all of the associations that are attached to these labels, but just for the sake of pragmatics, that's what I will call them, with their permission and consent for this conversation.
So, slightly more endearing than factor 1 and factor 2.
I think she will be amused when she hears this, because usually I call her my muse, and now it's all of a sudden she's degraded to, or devaluated to a factor. So I'm sure she'll see the humor in that.
I think it's a term of endearment. Emma, you are now my main factor, my primary factor. I love it. Okay. So backing up a little bit, just because I wanted to touch on that experience at Burning Man, because I think that's, Emma's got things.
No, I want to touch on that too. I would like to recap real quick first. So from throughout your 20s and everything, like, you're just trying to figure out, like, doing the relationships, but not really feeling like they work for you. Mm-hmm. And then about 8 years ago, you had experience with the person, with your partner, mm-hmm. that went to Burning Man. And we're going to dig into that a little bit more here in a second. Mm-hmm. And then since then, it's been this evolution of figuring out until today, where you're at today is identify as solo poly. And so It's kind of been a journey, at least of not exploring non-monogamy, the last 8 years or so. Is that accurate? All accurate?
That is accurate. But then if I look at my 20s from the lens and with the knowledge that I have now, I was actually already doing polyamory back then. I just wasn't aware of it. And that's where factor 1 comes in.
Okay. Well, why don't you touch on that right now, and then we'll go back to the Burning Man.
Yeah, I'm sorry if this is getting confusing.
No, it's okay.
It's also, that's what I love about talking to people about my relationship constellations, because every time I have this kind of conversation, I come to new realizations, such as muse and factor are interchangeable terms. I will need to send her a message about that before she hears the podcast. But no, what was happening in my early 20s was that there was this girl who was also at uni and who was very clearly hitting on me. And I was in a relationship back then, a monogamous relationship. And as often happens, my male partner wasn't really against me having a thing with a girl, because it was kind of like, it wasn't necessarily hot or sexy for him, but he didn't see it as a threat. And he would apply what I call ostrich strategy, where, like, if I don't know about it, it hasn't happened and I don't have to deal with it. So it was something.
Head in the sand.
Yes, exactly. That's why I call it ostrich. And so he would sort of condone it. And then every now and then we would, so she and I would get together. And so I call her my muse, because she is the one who first introduced me to girl on girl sex, and with whom I really explored that side of myself and my sexuality. I had been, like, from a very early age on, very much aware of the fact that I usually find female bodies, like, in general, I find them so much more luscious and attractive, generally speaking, than male bodies. And that's not to create a hierarchy. It's just something I noticed with myself, that everyone around me was talking about boyfriends, and I was like, no, I don't like boys. I'm scared of boys. So that was like, but I do like women's bodies. Like, they were so beautiful. So there was always this kind of fascination. I had also kissed a girl and liked it every now and then as a preteen and a teenager. So she really, my news factor person really awoke something in me that had already been sort of, I don't know, slumbering beneath the surface, and she really brought it out in me. And then that was amplified even more in the open relationship in which I became acquainted with the Burning Man community.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. No, thank you for adding that in. And like, it was definitely part of your journey. And I love that. I love that you were able to explore and I don't know. Yeah. I'm trying to think of another word other than explore, but have those experiences in your early 20s, and have that shape your journey.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Cause I think that's something that often people don't realize until much later. And it sounds like, and just something I picked up on, like in your sort of describing it, even sounds like there's still a little bit of, you're like, oh, I'm not trying to create a hierarchy, like, oh, that one's better than the other. But at the same time, like, it's okay if there is for you, right? Right. Like, people tend to have a preference for one or the other. And that's not that one's better than the other, but just that you see something in one versus the other.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring that up, because I think as a younger girl, I felt safer with girls than with boys, even though I had a lot of male friends. That's not, I've always felt comfortable, but that's the thing, they were friends, and I wasn't necessarily comfortable delving into anything sexual with them. I was a pretty late bloomer in that respect. And so if you would tell 15-year-old Sara that by the time she was 40, she would be non-monogamous, polyamorous, kinky, unmarried woman, she would probably not have believed you. And I think that's the beauty of life, of just like coming into my own, and like even now just revisiting some of the experience from my childhood and my teenage years, even my 20s, and just seeing them in a different light, and everything does make sense. And but while I don't necessarily distinguish between male, female, non-binary, genderqueer, gender fluid in terms of whom I get attracted to, I do feel that gender plays a role in the sense of how people approach me, and how I'm able to relate with people. And in a lot of cases, it's again, I don't want to generalize, but this is I can only speak to my personal experiences, that sometimes men get almost annoyed by the fact that I'm confident and that I know who I am, and that they want to create a hierarchy, and that then leads to problems because I might not be willing to go along with that, right? I might not accept that they are going to put themselves above me in some way or another. So that is something that I have, especially in the last maybe 10 years, that I have struggled with a lot. Struggle sounds a bit harsh, but it has been a bit of a recurring theme where, I don't know, there's a bit of a power struggle sometimes going on.
That the autonomy is intimidating to somebody, that they're, I think because it goes against so much of what we often experience in life is a man typically comes in and has some amount of extra power in most situations, and people defer to that. And you're sort of saying, yeah, I'm not going to really defer to that anymore.
Yeah, and that's kind of another reason why I feel so comfortable in the non-monogamous and also in the neurodiverse and in the kink communities, is that people don't care so much about mainstream opinions, and people do things differently, and they are open to other forms of relating, not just in a romantic or in a sexual sense, but also other forms of engaging with other people, where it might be common or normal or acceptable or whatever you want to call it for a woman to be more powerful than a man, which I'm an academic and I'm a fairly young woman in academia. And I can tell you there's a lot of power struggles going on in my everyday life that can be very exhausting. And so it's liberating to be in communities where these rules don't apply. And I just get to be me without all of the labels attached to my my status, my job, my income, my whatnot.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I love the cat, by the way. I just have to.
She's a constant cameo in a lot of the when I'm in meetings or when I'm recording video lectures. Like, my students are huge fans of this.
I love it.
Cats are drawn to the like Zoom meetings and
they're drawn to attention.
Right.
They're attention whores, all of them, and they will be there where there is attention to be had.
Anyway, I didn't mean to distract from what you were saying, Sara. Thank you. Yeah,
I don't think I was saying anything.
Thank you for what you shared. I think it's it's spot on to have that space where you can feel like it's like a relief to be around in that different environment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, and I'm curious how sort of neurodivergence plays into this for you. You talked a little bit about it in terms of being sensitive and needing a little more downtime, but it sounds like it's shaped more of the experience for you, and that even, as a pansexual person, as a neurodivergent person, as all of the ways that Sara is in the world, this community feels like a better fit to you.
Definitely. And this is something which I'm leaning into more and more, this side of me. I think in general, the world doesn't necessarily cater to people whose brains are not working in a typical, and again, air quoting here, not working in a typical way. People who have issues with impulses, I also have a chronic pain history where my brain is super sensitive to impulses, and when it's overwhelmed, that will translate as pain. And the world doesn't necessarily accommodate my type of brain. So I feel out of place a lot of the time. Like a lot of the time. It can be in really small things, like being on the train and people are video calling with the sound on, and I get to hear both sides of the conversations, like, please just leave me alone. And so I do indeed feel very much at home in non-mainstream communities. And it's also one of the things that sort of binds me and my two current partners is that all of us are neurodivergent. And we have a lot of conversations about how it seems like the rest of the world is in a different universe from ours, and we can very strongly relate to one another in that way. And that's really it's a huge part of our connection. That and also like pheromones, of course, but it is a huge part of our connection.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about that just for a minute, because I'm curious. And there's probably research on this, but I think let's, if you can hang with me in this analogy, translating neurodivergence to another. Let's say your neurodivergence is Mandarin and your partner's neurodivergence is Spanish. Mm-hmm. Do your neurodivergencies, or are you both speaking Mandarin? Are you both speaking Spanish? Or do you show up with neurodivergencies that clash, but because you're both speaking what is a non-typical language, you found a way to have more empathy and understand each other better?
You mean a non-typical language for...
They're both coming in with something that is quote unquote different or unique, but they're not the same uniqueness, but that they're both unique. So you come in on a level playing field anyway.
Yeah, and I would like to describe it as let's say indeed we speak Mandarin and Spanish, and then let's say some Swedish, which I do speak, so that would be me, and then we all sort of understand bits and pieces of each other's languages, and then we come together in this Esperanto, in this kind of artificial language that we are creating because we are looking for tools and terms and concepts and a vocabulary that we can use to communicate with one another. I think that's probably like, we can understand bits and pieces and we can relate to certain aspects of one another's neurodivergence, and then we communicate about it in an entirely different language that is us picking up on aspects, and that is in a non-existent language. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I imagine for some people who witness that in certain situations, they're like, what just happened? Like, how did this just happen? And it just, you have your own. But I offer that we probably all have that in long-term partnerships where things happen and it's like, well, how did you know? And it's like, oh, well, she did this and this and this, and that to me just triggers this. And we're speaking this unspoken language all the time.
Yeah. And the beautiful thing is that we also get along really well among the three of us. So I'm sort of like the hinge partner. And sometimes we get together, the three of us, and then we have like ridiculous amounts of fun. We also have very serious conversations, especially my boyfriend also identifies as sapiosexual, where he will be asking us a lot of questions because he admires our intellect and wants to learn from us. And this is not me putting words in his mouth. That's how he actually puts it. He will be, I just want to have these intellectual conversations with you. And then we will go off and have like a lot of sex together, right? And it's just, all of that is enmeshed. And it's something that we're also really ridiculous when we're together while we're talking about super serious things. So I feel very seen and I feel very safe when I'm with them. And I don't need to explain everything because they understand me. And when they don't, I know that I have the vocabulary to explain it to them because we know each other very well.
And that they have the empathy to receive what you're about to explain.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. Thank you for explaining all of that and sharing all of that.
You're welcome.
I think it's incredible. And I don't think it's anything new, but it is something that we've started having guests on the show who have been more open and willing to talk about how the neurodivergence and non-monogamy dovetail into one another, and that it's a world that they feel that they can exist in better. And I think it's important to touch on, and for people who are out there wondering, like,
well, I think the two overlap a lot.
Yeah, I mean, it's essentially a circle. If you look at the Venn diagram, I recognize that. I mean, it's not exactly, but there is a lot of overlap, and it makes a lot of sense why.
Yeah.
And I think it's also, what is also really important for my own personal development is just owning up to all of that. Maybe 10 years ago, I wouldn't have been comfortable with people at work knowing that I have this brain issue, because then maybe they would think of me differently. And I was still in the process of doing my PhD, and I wanted to, no, I don't want them to know because I don't want to get special treatment, blah, blah, blah. Whereas now I'm going to lead with this. This is how my brain works, and I don't really understand what you're saying right now, but we need to make this work together because we're colleagues. So let's have a conversation about how we can work this out so that it functions and that it operates well for all of us. So it's an important personal evolution that has been very characteristic also of the last few years. And just I'll segue myself into talking about coming out, because I've been out in certain areas of my life. For instance, my factor muse has been sort of, our closest friends have sort of always known that there was something going on between us, and some would be more curious about it than others, but we never really hid it. But I've only been out properly for roughly 2 years, where I'm also owning up to it at work, where people tend to assume about me that I am straight and that I am monogamous. And I used to sort of feel comfortable enough where I would just let it slide, and I would be okay with passing for straight and monogamous. But then the past few years, that has, for me, started to feel less and less authentic, where I feel like I'm lying about something that's actually a pretty big part of my life. And so now when I notice that people are starting from that assumption about me, I will go against it. I will speak up about it, and I will correct it. Yeah, I think I read as fairly straight in the sense that, some people have commented that my hair, which for the listeners is quite short, that my hair is very, very lesbian. Those of you listening, you know who you are. But that's the only thing, right? I like wearing makeup. I like fashion. So I'm a pretty feminine. I'm pretty female or feminine leaning in how I present. But I don't feel comfortable with people imposing the heterosexual identity on me anymore. So that has been sort of like an active choice. I'm also out with my students. So I teach at university, and when I teach queer theory, I teach feminist criticism. So when we have these kinds of conversation, I will also find a way of, I won't be jumping on the table and saying, you should listen to me because I am queer and I know what I'm talking about. No, I will try to work it into the conversation in a natural and not too obvious way. I don't want it to be about me, but I do want my students to know that they are safe with me to talk about these kinds of topics and to express their own identity. I find that very important. So.
Yeah. Oh, yes, definitely.
And probably just as important as the conversation that you said, like now you have with colleagues at the start of a relationship to say, this is how my brain works. And I think, damn, if we all had that, like how much easier would the workplace be if you're like, well, hey, we know when we go ask Sara for something, we do it like this because that's a way that Sara can process that. And I'm probably going to get the thing I want versus every time I ask Sara doesn't do it. And then I'm pissed off and then I go into, and it's like, yeah, but man, there's an easier way to do that.
Well, but it's also in you, like you sharing that with them, you're trusting their response, right? The way they're going to handle that situation, which can be scary. It's like as well, because, and that's sad that that's the way it is. Like
I'm with you. I understand. And that's why I brought up 10 years ago, I wouldn't have felt comfortable also because I was still, getting to know how does academia work, what is acceptable, and now it's just like, okay, I know the code, I can speak the language, but I'm not going to do it because it makes me unhappy, and also it will make my relationships with my coworkers fraught sometimes, and I don't want that. And I also ask my coworkers what works well for them and how they would like me to approach them and ask them for help or favors or input. So it works both ways.
As it should, right? Like that's really how people should relate to one another. Of like,
yeah, that's not how it
no,
is.
I know. No, it's like, and then there's so many reasons, and we don't need to go down that rabbit hole necessarily. But it's thank you for at least for talking about this, because there's so much wrapped up in it, and it's so important. And hopefully, I mean, how do we create change as we start?
Exactly.
Well, I think what this sort of for me introduces is, everybody is always saying, well, the key to a good relationship or even the key to non-monogamy is communication and having good communication. And for me, one of the places that good communication starts is getting rid of all the assumptions that we know what's coming or we know how to do something based on our previous experiences. And what you're doing when you do this is you're taking all of those and throwing them out, even for the neurotypicals, and saying, hey, person, you may or may not be neurotypical, but like, what works for you? You're having a conversation that in many ways you've been forced to have, so people can understand you, that everybody else takes for granted, that they're just like, oh, we just assume and we just know. But like, we don't. No. We just assume. And then we fuck it up, and then we get mad at each other, and then everything breaks down. And in many ways, you're forced into that conversation to survive. You're not fitting yourself into that box, just like religion. Yeah.
Thank you for summarizing. It makes me sound like very proactive and like a trailblazer, but it's just me also trying to make my own life more comfortable.
But it is proactive. I mean, in many ways, it's almost like you're taking on the burden of solving. I mean, you're solving your own sort of quote unquote problem that like, I keep running into this. Here's a solution for it. And it frankly, it's a solution that could be extrapolated and mapped to everybody, to just treat each other a little bit more understanding and kind. Yeah.
So from now on, everybody listen to Sara whenever she says something, because she knows what she's talking about. Let this be the conclusion of this conversation.
Yes.
That was my takeaway. I'll be calling you a lot for opinions.
I know that at the beginning of this conversation, you mentioned Burning Man and that whole experience, and Finn, you mentioned you wanted to ask some questions on that, and then we never circled back.
Well, it almost seems irrelevant at this point, but since you bring it up, Emma, it was really just around, because I think what you described is another common thing that we hear from people is, I think I would be too jealous. And you didn't exactly say that piece, but
but that was underneath it. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I would be too jealous to ever do something like this. And then you do it. Yeah. And then it's like, wait a minute, that's not jealousy. I actually really enjoyed that. Or there's pieces of this that are a big turn on. But in the moment, in that first experience, your partner just, I'm assuming, jetted off to the US, went to the playa, no cell phone connection. And you're like, well, I don't know. They're going to go and do whatever they're going to do. And I'll just find out in a week or so.
Yes.
Like, that's big...
it's not like you can be in touch with somebody when they're at Burning Man.
No. Do you want me to talk about that particular week?
I would love to, because I think what's interesting is that the end result takeaway is, I quite like this, but that may not have been the initial shock of it all.
No, and I wasn't quite there yet in that week. And it was actually, it was a lot of me feeling sorry for myself. It's like, he's off to Burning Man and I'm here. The academic year is starting and I'm trotting off to work and have to start teaching. So it was a lot of also being sad that I wasn't part of that experience. It was also me being very insecure. And after he got back, I also expressed that to him, like, I'm just wondering, am I not enough for you? I remember that conversation. I even remember where we were sitting, how we were positioned vis-a-vis one another physically, and me asking the question, am I not enough for you? Because of course that is the cultural narrative that had been imprinted in my brain from years of mononormativity. And his response was, no, I don't think I'm ever going to be satisfied sexually with just one partner. And I'm so grateful to him for the entire experience of that relationship. Not as if he showed me the way, but he did open up a lot of doorways into new experiences that I wouldn't have explored otherwise. And that moment where he replied, no, it's never going to be enough for me, was like such a click. It was like, of course, like, why am I expecting that this other person will be satisfied, will have enough of an experience with just me, because there's only so much I as a person can offer. And that was sort of a tipping point. And then it took months and years of further trying things out and seeing what I was comfortable with and what I wasn't. But that was sort of the aha light bulb moment where I realized that I could make things easier for myself if I tried to approach them differently. And what I also took away from that relationship is just don't ever say or try to avoid saying, I don't like that, but maybe say, I'm not sure I will like that, but let me give it a try. And there's this one quote from Sex and the City, which, let's not get into it, but Samantha at one point says, I'm a trisexual. I'll try anything once. And that's sort of what I've taken away from that relationship. Like, I don't know if I will like that or not. I think I won't, but I mean, I also didn't think I would like getting tied up and blindfolded. And it's one of my favorite things in the world now. So why not explore it and try it on and see if it fits? And if it doesn't, then at least I know.
Yeah. I relate very much to that. and I love that the way you just described that, all the experience of, like, you know, I remember this conversation and that click, like, obviously approximately 8 years later, like that, remembering that, you're like, oh, you know, those points in our lives happen and they stand out, and it's like, okay, this was a turning point, and it's not like everything before that was bad or wrong or something, but you're like, this is really like, now I can explore all of this, and feels more true to me. And I just didn't necessarily recognize that before.
Yeah.
And it's really powerful.
Yeah, it is. And thank you for playing it back to me like this, because it's like, yeah, I actually am. And have you noticed that I've been smiling all throughout this conversation, because it makes me so happy to be able to talk about this. And let me just drop in here real quickly as well that I so appreciate your podcast, because what it offers me is feeling more seen, because there's a lot of people who are having the same kinds of experiences and who are asking the same questions and going through similar things. And it just offers a platform for reflection about, is this how I feel as well? Or, is that the way they do it? I could also consider this. And it's very hands-on, and it's just like slices of life. And I enjoy that very much. So
thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Well, and maybe just to take off on that, you've dropped little hints around kink into this conversation. And I'm wondering if you'd be willing to talk about how that aspect has come alive for you and then been woven into your journey.
And I also do want to just comment that I love that you've been smiling this whole time. It's such a joy.
Thank you. I can guarantee that I wasn't smiling this morning, for instance, when I was at work, but like, it's just, I was smiling a bit while I was working, but also like, this is when I come alive, when I get to talk about the things that are so close to my heart and that are such an important part of my life and my personality.
I love that. Well, let that be a lesson to anybody listening. If you want to smile, you come on the podcast. It will change your day. It'll turn your day around.
It will. And I was kind of hoping it would, but I didn't want to like put too much pressure on myself and on this conversation. So I was sort of managing my own expectations. But glowing reviews for you.
Oh, thank you. It takes all of us. It takes all of us.
True.
Including your cat.
Yes. Sure, that always helps. So, kink and how that showed up in my life and what role that is playing. What I remember about the introduction of kink in my life are two things in particular. One was, again, that partner with whom I was in that open relationship had waited several months, I think almost a year, before expressing to me explicitly that he was kinky. And I was so surprised by that. I was taken aback, not because I'm like, are you kinky? But because like, why didn't you tell me? And so he was projecting a lot of social stigma around kink on me. He was expecting that I would be appalled or that I would be shocked or whatnot, but I wasn't. I was like, I'm not sure that's going to be for me. But I don't know. Let's go to some events and let's see if that sparks anything in me.
Spoken like a true trisexual, by the way.
Exactly, right. And that's also a really important realization for me at that point, is that there were some aspects of stigma that that were maybe in the back of my head, but I didn't let them stop me. I was like, okay, but then let's see if we can prove people wrong, right? Or if there's anything to it that I'm not seeing. And clearly there's a lot to it that I wasn't seeing. And then the second important factor when it comes to me discovering my own kink was at a Burning Man event in Europe, where we had signed up for a BDSM camp. And so we were volunteering, of course, and helping run the camp, help organize it. And one of the things that the camp was offering was almost around the clock shibari demonstrations. So there were people being tied left, right, and center for that entire week. And I had the most amazing turnaround in just my own stance, my position vis-a-vis rope, where at the beginning of the week, I was like, that looks so painful. I don't think I would ever want to try that because it looks like it's horrendous to have your body like constrained in that way. But then I did have like a click with one of the riggers, one of the people who was doing the tying, where we were sort of into each other, and then he offered to tie me up. And by the end of the week, I had my first rope experience, and it was mind-blowing. It was like a 3-hour-long sensational orgasm type thing, where I still cannot find the words to describe it, but it was like, it was really an epiphany. And again, I think a lot of my growth and a lot of my learning moments have come from precisely the instances where I was like, I'm not sure, but let's try it. And exploring and trying things on and seeing if they fit. And so that was Shibari is still the thing that I like most. And it gives me huge escape from daily life. Because in the type of job that I'm in, I need to be or I feel like I need to be in control of things a lot of the time. I have a lot of responsibilities, want to make sure that things go as smoothly as possible for my coworkers and my students, and trying to stay on top of my own work next to all of that. And then when I'm in ropes, I can let go and I can release and explore trusting someone else with making decisions for me. I particularly like being blindfolded when I'm tied, because then I can't see what's going to happen next, and I just have to feel it and live it and experience it. Although I have to say I'm not entirely letting go of control even when I'm in ropes. I'll be like giving small nudges, or I'm not submissive. I'm not really submissive, so I will sort of give hints. But I like the option of letting go to a large extent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah. And that makes sense. Like I think many people listening will find that relatable. Of in one part of your life, you have to feel like you're in control and you have to manage a lot. And there is a release when whatever it is that you find to have that release. It doesn't matter what it is. That it's an really important part of the human experience, right? Just living, because we all, it's not, I would say, I'm trying to think of how to word this. You don't want to stay in that state of, for lack of a better word, stress all of the time. But finding releases, finding ways to calm and bring your body down to a different state and just be in the moment, is so important, and also can be so difficult to do, or to find what works for you, or to let yourself do it when you have a million things going through your brain and all of these things. So, thank you for sharing. I think it's beautiful.
Well, and also I'm a highly sensitive person, so I'm super, super sensitive to touch. And the people who are playing with me, they do not need to put in a lot of effort to get me going, right? It's like, and this is also something I really wanted to bring up, that I find being neurodivergent challenging a lot of the time, but it has also made me so much more in tune with my surroundings, and it has given me some really beautiful experiences, like discovering that just like the stroke of a rope or the touch of a rope can really drive me. It can drive me to sensational or sensory heights very, very quickly. So I don't need a lot.
Which is a pretty amazing discovery to make about yourself at some point along the journey, which is incredible. Yeah.
You've listened to the podcast before. You know that we like to ask the question about some favorite bloopers to show that sex and relationships don't always go as planned. Yes. Do you have any that you would like to share?
Yes, I was thinking about this beforehand, like in preparation, because I was going to be a little bummed with myself if I hadn't been able to come up with a blooper, because I have been trying out a lot of things and they have gone wrong. And then there was one in particular that involves both my boyfriend and my girlfriend, and I have their consent to talk about this. It also involves my dad, but I didn't ask him for consent, so I will need to redress that after the podcast. So I will start by saying that I came out to my family around 2 years ago as well, and my parents' response was the best I could have wished for. They just said, as long as you're happy, that's all that we care about. So that it's just, I feel very privileged in that I am surrounded by people with whom I can express all of these parts of my identity. So now to the blooper. One evening last summer, I was having a date at my place with boyfriend and girlfriend, and they had just arrived, and it was a beautiful evening. We were out on the balcony in my apartment, and my boyfriend had just gotten out of the shower. He wanted to freshen up before we started the evening. And while he was getting ready, the doorbell rang. And I'm not the type of person who has a lot of people come over unexpectedly. Because, I'm quite private, and I'm more the kind of, you let me know if you want to drop by kind of person. So unexpectedly, the doorbell rings, and it's my dad. So I'm at the whatchamacallit. It's not a video phone, but the audio phone, like where I can talk to people at the door. So I'm at the phone with my dad. I'm like, Dad. And my brain went, yeah, I want him to come in, and I want him to actually visit me, because he doesn't do that very often. So now that he's here, paying me a surprise visit, of course I want him to come in. Second thought is, oh, but my boyfriend and my girlfriend are here. Third thought is, oh, but I've already prepared a cuddle puddle for us in my living room, which he needs to walk through, my dad needs to walk through in order to get to the balcony where we were having a drink. So I tell my dad, yeah, it's okay, you can come up, but my girlfriend and my boyfriend are here. Meanwhile, my boyfriend is showing up from the bar, like just in a towel, and he's like, should I put clothes on? And I'm like, yeah, that might be a good idea. And then my dad walks in, and I lead him through my living room to the balcony, and I'm just hoping that he doesn't notice the cuddle puddle that has been prepared, because I'm like, I'm not sure I want to have that conversation. Like he had met my girlfriend before, but it was the first time he was meeting my boyfriend, and so it was awkward for a full 30 seconds, and then we had a drink together, we had a chat and a laugh, and then when my dad left, the three of us sort of got comfy in the cuddle puddle and had a good laugh about it for like several minutes before we actually then transitioned into the sexy part of the night. And it was just one of those things where it's like, so this is what being out also implies. Like, where you will be in situations where your dad shows up unexpectedly, and you will need to decide whether you will have the conversation about, there being a lot of pillows and blankets and such on the floor in the middle of your living room, and what they're there for, whether you want to go there or not. So, yeah, for me, that was a bit of a hilarious situation.
And it sounds like your dad never asked.
He never asked. Yeah, he never asked. Yeah.
Which I love in one sense, right? It's pillows and blankets, right? It's not like you had a St. Andrew's cross and your all of your accoutrement for like a kinky scene. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, like what if these were friends who came over to play board games every week, and your dad stops by and you're like, well, I didn't know, should we put our board game away? Right. Yeah. And it's so weird that our brains are like, well, I got to put the pillows and blankets away because those could be used, versus like, I have to put away, Settlers of Catan because he might see something. And it's just I get it, but it's also a strange paradox to me.
Yeah. And there's a difference between my parents knowing that I have a boyfriend and a girlfriend, and my parents knowing that I that I enjoy shibari, and then them physically seeing what it entails, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that I was ready to confront my dad with that. But
no, for sure.
If he did notice, he chose to not engage in that conversation, and I respected his choice. But like the release with girlfriend and boyfriend in the cuddle puddle, just the comic relief was, was pretty intense. So.
Well, I love to. I just give your dad a lot of credit too, right? Living by the statement that he and your mother made, that we just want you to be happy, right? That he walks into an environment and he's like, whatever's happening here, right? It's not offensive to me, and it's making Sara happy, right? He saw some blankets and pillows, even if he's like, oh, I can't imagine the atrocities that are going to happen there, but he doesn't have to. He's just like, hey, pillows and blankets. My daughter's happy. I'm meeting these people, and I got to have this time, right? He could have used that to be upset and hurt and shocked and wasted that entire visit, and chose to just enjoy it. And I think that says a lot about that they really embraced the thing that they said of just, we want you to be happy.
Yeah. Yeah. And this actually brings to mind, if we have another 2 minutes.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. One time that must have been around the beginning of the open relationship. I'm trying to put together the chronology. I was visiting a friend of mine who was in the States for a couple of months to do his PhD. I was visiting, and that same weekend, his parents also happened to visit. And I was staying over at his place, and we slept in the same bed. We've been friends for forever, and we've expressed to one another like there's no sexual tension between us whatsoever, and we actually love that because it makes our relationship that much less complicated, because we know that we're always just going to be friends, and we don't have to deal with any kind of issues that may come up surrounding. Is he going to come on to me? Is she going to come on to me? That kind of thing. We had talked about, are we going to tell his parents that we slept in the same bed or not? And because it was a thing for his parents. And I had said, like, let's just try and be open about it, because there's nothing wrong with us. We're both adults here. Your wife back home knows that I'm here. She's one of my best friends. She knows that I'm here. She knows that I'm sleeping in this bed. She doesn't have an issue with it. Why should your parents? And he was like, oh yeah, actually you're right. We should probably do this. His parents visit, and they notice that there's just one bed, and that there's no sleeping bag or air mattress or anything. And his mom gets really upset. And she's like, how can you do this to your wife? And so I was being slut-shamed for sleeping in the same bed. And she kept going on and on about it for the entire weekend. And at one point I just told her, like, who are you to make these kinds of assumptions? And why do you think I would do something like this to my best friend? And like, if she's okay with it, why should you not be? And eventually his wife ended up calling her mother-in-law and be like, I really don't want you to meddle in this. And so it was a whole drama, and it makes me so happy to have a family who is just respectful of the way I want to live my life. It's just a nice kind of opportunity to reflect on just how lucky I am.
Yeah, that's such a hard situation to navigate, because you're the other woman in quotes, but you're also not. You're just a friend, and wow, it's just crazy.
Well, imagine if you were, and then just like, and his wife knew, and it was all above board. I mean, that would be another,
Yeah, but then if he had made the decision to not be out with his parents, then it would have made it so much more complicated.
Yes. Oh, they're hard. It's hard situations to navigate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I have loved this conversation, Sarah. Thank you. Thank you for reaching out. Hey, you sent us a voicemail. So that's a reminder to people that when you send us voicemails, you often wind up here. And so
it could also be a warning for people.
That's right. It's both. It's both. But you shared that you went from not as smiley to much more smiley. And so it is an invitation, not a warning.
Is there anything else that you wanted to get out there before we let you go?
No, I think that's about it, really. I've really enjoyed I've enjoyed the knowledge that maybe someone else will listen to this and they will be like, huh, okay, that's what things are like in my life as well. And that maybe they can take away something from this. I'm a teacher, so I'm always going to be like hoping to sort of plant little seeds in people's minds, like kernels that can grow into something, that can blossom into something. So that's why, I really felt compelled to be on the podcast, because I want to share in the experience of feeling seen, and I hope that someone else feels seen when they listen to this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
I have no doubt.
Yeah.
Also,
I agree.
Yeah. Thank you, Sara, for coming on, for sharing your story. And we hope, I hope we get to do an update in a couple of years and see what else is going on, because it's been such a fun, lovely conversation. So thank you.
Yeah, I would love that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Sara, for coming on. Oh, I didn't do it.
And we're back.
And we're back. I threw Finn for a loop.
I didn't know what was happening.
Okay, take 2, and we're back. Thank you, Sara, for coming on and sharing your story, reaching out to us. We love talking to you, and thank you for your openness and vulnerability in the discussion and sharing.
And thank you for the standing invite to come hang out at the Delirium Bar and sip a couple beers together.
Yes, that would be amazing.
We will be there.
Sometime for sure.
I will be back.
Yeah, you've been there before. I have not.
Yeah, I don't remember that night. I remember standing in a puddle. That's what I remember of that night.
Because it was raining out?
It was raining on my liver, is what it was doing.
Too much beer, huh?
Way too much.
Anyway,
that was 10 years ago, Finn.
Now you made me lose my chain of
12 years ago, Finn.
12 years ago. We wanted to send a couple of quick reminders here, or share a couple of quick reminders. First up, we are taking a break from virtual meet and greets for the summer. We'll let you know as soon as those are back. But that is the only thing we're taking a break from. Everything, the podcast-wise, is going to keep going. And,
our relationship.
Yes. And with the community, everything will keep going. In fact, as you heard in the intro, or unless you're a premium subscriber, we are adding weekly peer support groups as well. More information about those are in the intro if you missed that, or go to our website, normalizingnon-monogamy.com, and click on the community tab, and you can find out more.
You can. I don't have a whole lot else to say other than we're super excited about that, and just really grateful to Sara for coming on and being amazing.
Yes. Next week we have another wonderful, fun conversation. We actually interviewed a clone of myself. Yes, that was true.
So
we talked.
If you want to watch Finn talk to himself for an hour,
we talked to Lee and Brady next week, and oh my gosh, throughout this conversation, I thought in some ways we were talking to Finn's clone. So, it's a great conversation. We encourage you to come back and listen. Until then, have a wonderful week.
Don't forget to sign up for those weekly calls,
or the community in general too.
And have a wonderful time. It's summer. Well, unless you're in the Southern Hemisphere.
Then it's not summer. But...
Hey, it's summer here. We're a little bit self-centered. So enjoy your summer or your winter.
Yes, enjoy your June.
There you go.
Although we'll see you next week, which is still June.
Emma's a very inclusive person.
Pride Month.
Hey.
Happy Pride Month.
I feel a little bit bad that we just tacked it on here at the very end.
Next week?
Yeah. I think because for me, we kind of celebrate Pride Month all the time.
We do.
In the sense that we have a wide variety of people doing a wide variety of amazing things. Mm-hmm. But I think that's worth probably mentioning it a little more officially.
It is definitely worth it.
All right. Well, you heard it here first.
Happy June. Happy Pride Month. Thank you all for listening. And I didn't do my normal sign off. I'm throwing this outro off like crazy.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for listening.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for listening.